Good morning and welcome to another one of Drew's book review. So today we are reviewing Raymond E. Feist's book, The King's Buccaneer. So essentially this story revolves around Prince Nicholas and his squire Harry. He is sent off to Cridey where he is expected to squire to his uncle essentially to learn how to be a proper nobleman as he is in line for the throne eventually, and he has a lot of learning to do to understand court and politics and policy and responsibilities and that sort of thing. But while he's there, both Harry and Nicholas get swept off an adventure. Now, this happens after the town of Cridey is essentially raided and burned to the ground. Hundreds of people are kidnapped and captured by these raiders, specifically two ladies of the court, Abigail and Margaret, whom both Harry and Nicholas are starting to fall in love with. And so they embark on an adventure to chase these raiders and pirates across the endless sea to a distant land that nobody even knew existed, as they embark on this adventure to hunt them down and find out what's really going on and what's really happening. So of course, there's Harry and there's Nicholas, and they embark on this adventure. Big crew, big ship, only to find themselves devastatingly shipwrecked by magical forces in which they have to survive without food, without water, along with the survivors of this wreck. And of course, they manage to do so. I mean, with these types of books, the hero always survives, so that in and of itself is not much of a surprise there. Um, but I do certainly have some criticisms of this book. First of all, the first 100 pages, honestly, are just a dull. They are boring as hell. There just isn't a lot happening within those first 100 pages. It's really more like a day in the life of the court, and there's really not much going on. I think Raymond and Feist was certainly trying to establish his position, or Nicholas's position as squire, trying to establish the fact that he was settling into life in Cridey, trying to establish the fact that he was seriously falling in love between Harry and Nicholas with Margaret and Abigail. But it was boring, honestly. That first 100 pages, I can't. I think you could almost take that out of the book and still not be missing anything. That overall was not all that great of a part of the book. As once the attack on Cridey happens, though, that's when the adventure really picks up. That's where we start to get some excitement, and that's where things really start to get entertaining and enjoyable within this read. One of the other criticisms I have, though, is Prince Nicholas's foot was deformed from birth. So he has this ailment or this disability with this deformed foot, and he's been told his whole life that it cannot be healed by the wings of magic. But then, Pug comes along and suddenly it's able to be healed, but not really healed. So even though the foot's no longer deformed, apparently it's still not healed because it's still causing him pain and suffering, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you established that it couldn't be healed by magic, and then, Pug the Wizard comes along and heals it by magic, though not really healing it because Nicholas doesn't embrace the healing somehow. I just didn't think that worked. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous part of the plot and really has no bearing in there. Either his foot was healed or it wasn't. Either way, deformed or not deformed foot, it doesn't really matter to the overall story. At least I didn't feel that it did. It wasn't really purpose. There's no purpose to that point. And I'll just say right now, spoiler alert here, but right at the very end, just when all hope seems lost, my other criticism is that suddenly a dragon shows up out of absolutely nowhere and burns their enemies to a crisp. Where did this dragon come from? It just magically appeared out of nowhere and saved the day. There was no lead up to it. There was no talk or hint that there were dragons coming or part of the story up until that point. It just shows up, burns everyone to a crisp, and flies away. And magically, Pug's flying on the back of this dragon, which is great. Pug's a great character. In fact, he's one of my favorite characters from the world of Mechemia that Raymond E. Feist has created. But that seemed like a cop out. It seemed like really lazy storytelling. Didn't seem in place. It seems so out of place there. I think there could have been a much better way that he could have come up with to wrap up the story. Like, if he's going to have the dragon come in at the end, then there should have been some talk, some indication that dragons are part of this story from the beginning, instead of magically appearing and then flying off on the horizon. That just made no sense whatsoever to me. So those are my criticisms of the King's Buccaneer. In terms of the overall story, though, I thought it was a great story, good plot. It was a fun high seas adventure with pirates and kidnappings and serpent men and people and just all kinds of really exciting and fun stuff. That I would have to say overall, I'm kind of disappointed in this book by Raymond E. Feist. I thought it wasn't well executed. There was a lot of things within the book that simply didn't seem to have much of a place. The plot kind of fell apart in some sense. So overall, I have to say I wasn't too impressed with this Raymond E. Feist book. Um, Compared to his other writings and his other book, still a great story, just I thought poorly executed in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, well, no author's perfect, right? I mean, we all have those authors that have some really great works, and then there's just that one book that seems to disappoint based on what you read before. This was one of those. But I mean, I'm certainly not going to stop reading Raymond E. Feist. I think overall he's still a really great writer. So those are my thoughts on the King's Buccaneer. So I hope you enjoyed this review, and as always, don't forget to comment, subscribe, like below. You could also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'll have all the links to that in the description below. And as always, stay tuned. Next up, we're going to be reading Michael Crichton's Travels. So looking forward to getting that. I think it's probably the only Michael Crichton book I haven't actually read. So definitely stay tuned for that. And again, thanks so much for watching. Of course, I'll be in the comments below, but of course, Facebook.com/Drew's Book Reviews, and on Twitter at Drew's Book Review, and Instagram at Drew's Book Reviews. I'll have all that in the comments below, or in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a great day. Bye.